Let me introduce our incredible panel. Julian from Antidote. We've got Dean McCullough from Radio 1. Dani St. James, founder of Not a Phase. And Kenny Ethan Jones. Please join us.
I'm going
I
over.
feel like you've lost the cushion there.
Oh, this is really comfy, this sofa.
There you go.
Oh, just me over
Look
here.
at one of you over here. Come on.
Segregation.
Let me come over here.
Cozy.
So we live in a fairer, more equal society, yet LGBTQ plus people are still very much a minority. And just because laws offer us freedoms and protections, it doesn't mean those rights are reflected in society's attitudes to people that are not heterosexual or cisgender. Gay shame was a phrase that became popularized around the time of Alan Downs' massively influential book, The Velvet Rage, that looked at the rise of queer rights and visibility over the past several decades. And it put it into the context of hundreds of years of oppression, as well as how the AIDS crisis further stigmatized specifically gay sex. Activists like David Stewart, who passed away last year, were early champions of openly discussing addiction through an LGBTQ context, and Matthew Todd's book Straitjacket has become an invaluable resource for dissecting gay shame. And while gay shame is often used in relation to gay male identities, I think it's probably more relevant to use the term queer shame, or we'll just refer to it as shame today, because obviously we want to reflect the experience through an LGBTQ plus lens. So, Dean.
Yes.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today, not on the radio.
This is cool. It's nice to talk and actually see people, not just be stuck in a black box. So thank you for having me.
I know. You have a high-profile job on Radio 1. So why do you think it's important for you to share your journey through addiction and drug and alcohol abuse?
It's a weird one, really, because whenever I started at Radio 1, I was already 4 months sober. So my journey at Radio 1 has always been sober, but I've been a presenter for 13 years, and so I sort of look at my career so far in like 3 different parts, and the part that I'm in at the minute is like part 1 of the rest of my life. So at Radio 1, it was one of the reasons actually why I stopped drinking, was because I didn't want to be sat in work in the studio on a Sunday morning talking to quite a lot of people on the radio and be anxious, feeling guilty, on a come down, stinking of booze, or still drunk, which actually was what happened quite a lot in the first half of my career. So I wanted to get my dream job, and that's why I stopped drinking. So I got my dream job. I've been at Radio 1 since December 2020, and I've got to say, I think if I was still drinking, I'm not really sure if I would have sort of grown as quickly as I have done at the BBC. So it definitely attributes it to it, but it's all in the mind, you know. It's definitely, just because I don't drink doesn't mean to say that everything got fixed. I think the pressure for me to go, like I'm going to the Brits tonight, for example, and if I was going to the Brits tonight and drinking, I think there would be this whole other layer of fear, you know. Drinking beforehand, we've all done it, pre-drinking in the hotel or pre-drinking in the flat, then going out, there's free drinks everywhere, then you go to the after party, and we all know what happens at after parties, and then I have to wait, 5 days for my agent to call me to say, so, that party that you went to, there's something that's going around on Snapchat. Not that I would be headline news, I'm really not saying that, but I needed to protect myself so that that didn't ruin the 13 years of hard work to get me to this stage. So it's been quite the journey, career-wise, I've got to say, but now I can just worry about other things, not making an absolute tit of myself at the Brit Awards or doing other things, you know?
So let's rewind a little bit and go back to when you were in the midst of your troubles. You have told me when we did an interview for Attitude Magazine that your addiction escalated during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you were drinking more and you were using drugs for sex.
Yeah.
Tell us about that journey, that cloud that you were in.
I mean, a show of hands for people in the room. During the pandemic, did you drink more? Can anybody relate to drinking more in the pandemic? I think we all, because we were stuck in the house, I think a lot of us were quite fearful of what was going on outside. And the things that we normally access externally to get ourselves a dopamine hit or just to feel something, that all got taken away from us. So gigs, just human contact, all of those fundamental things that we need as individuals in order to survive was taken away from us. And what I didn't realize was that one of my things was drinking wine. And I think even when you're younger, your parents might say to you, oh, you can have a glass of wine with dinner. Certainly in my family, it was okay for me to do that from a young age. And what my parents were doing was they were saying to me, we're helping you moderate your drinking. I'm Irish. It's entrenched in our culture to drink, and that's okay. But then when it came to the pandemic and I had no other... Can I swear here?
Yes, go for it.
I didn't have any...
Within reason.
Okay, I won't
No
say that word. But I call them fuck it cards. You know when you go, oh, it's been a really tough day, fuck it, I'll order a Domino's, or fuck it, I'll just watch one more episode of The Crown, or fuck it. You know, I didn't have any fuck it cards. I was completely out. So I turned to drinking. And I was doing a breakfast show on Gadio, which is an amazing radio station. And I had a lot of pressure because I was somehow classified as a key worker. So I had to get up every day, go into the studio, open it up, and present a breakfast show. And 5 days a week with no production team, no nothing. It was literally just me in a studio. And there was a lot of stress and a lot of pressure that I was carrying with me every day. Because unlike a lot of people, I couldn't pull the duvet over me and just watch more TV and tippy-tappy on Teams and just pretend to be working. Like, I had to get out there and entertain people and keep them up to date with what was going on in the news. But months and months and months and months of that was really, really affecting me. And the glass of wine that I was having on a Friday after work turned into like a bottle on a Tuesday, and then another bottle on a Wednesday, and then on a Friday I was drinking vodka because my housemate that I was living with at the time, are you okay?
You've traumatized.
No, really, are you okay? Can someone check he's all right? I was drinking vodka, and it was just getting a little bit out of control. So I realized one day, whenever I was going to work on a Monday, after not having much sleep all weekend, that I had drank a stupid amount of alcohol. I was looking at my bin, and I was like, to my housemate, I was like, did we drink all that this weekend? And he was like, yeah. And that's when I knew there was a problem. Up until this point, I didn't have a drink problem. I went out, got dressed up, going around Soho because I wanted to be out and to be mingling and to be having a good time. But in the pandemic, because I had no more fuck it cards, I was drinking. And then that's when all of that sort of darkness came and the more pressure, more anxiety, it all just got on top of me. And I then went into a state of a vicious circle and cycles of behavior that I had already done when I lived in London. From 2014 to 2016, I couldn't really tell you what I did, but things happened. I was going to parties in Vauxhall. I was going out till 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, but I couldn't really piece all of that together. I was having sex with multiple partners. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was young, but I thought that I'd boxed all that off and I'd never do it again. And then in the pandemic, I found myself doing a lot of those same things. And I was like, shit, right, stop, help, push the button, you know? And I still didn't think I would give up. I really didn't. I knew that one day I'd stop drinking, but I didn't think that I would be like sober this early in my life. So I had a party for Manchester Pride. Everyone came back to my house. And when everyone left on the early hours of the Monday morning, it was the 1st of September. And I turned around to my best friend and I said, I think I'm going to just stop drinking for a month. And actually, weirdly enough, I wasn't on a come down. I wasn't anxious. I was actually quite in my own head. So it was a real conscious decision to stop for good reason. So I thought, I'll do 30 days and we'll see how we go. And that was because I wanted to stop drinking. I wanted to save money to buy a house. I wanted to get my mental health back because I was having some really, really, really dark thoughts. And I wanted to get my dream job. And I thought that I could do that if I just made a small change, which was stopping drinking. Drugs weren't really a problem. I didn't, on a Tuesday when I was sober, think, oh, I'm going to go and pick up. It was always that wine, another wine, vodka, shots. You know, it just was like a slide into hell. So I thought I would give up for a month, and it's been 29 months without a drink, without anything. And I'm happy to tell you all that I did get my dream job. I did get my mental health back. And I just completed on my first house last week. I saved enough money from stopping drinking to be able to do all these things. So it was the weirdest journey to get myself to that point. And I would like to say that it was really dark and awful, and I battled with sobriety on and off and on and off and on and off. It wasn't that. I just made a decision that enough was enough, and it wasn't that I needed to stop drinking. It was that I needed to finally get all the things that I'd been dreaming of my whole life. So I did it.
Congratulations, it's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
I think it's important to look at the roots of why we drink and why we take drugs and what we're running away from. And you've spoken before about growing up in a single-parent household in Belfast, and you were bullied every day at school.
Yeah.
So was your drinking and your drug taking, was that a trigger from the bullying that you received as a child then?
Yeah, it definitely was. And I actually think that the reason why I started to take drugs in the first place when I first moved to London, so I moved to London when I was 17 for drama school. 17, that's so young, but I thought that I could do it. And I didn't really take drugs in drama school. It wasn't until I was sort of graduating and I had friends that worked in the West End and I was going to parties with them. I was going to premieres and press nights. And it was all quite fabulous. It was all really fun and we all looked good. And it didn't have that seedy kind of dirty, naughty vibe to it. It was like, oh, there's Coke. Everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it as well because that's glamorous and that's fun and that's rock star. So I did all of that. But through therapy, which I started whenever I was 1 year sober, I realized that actually I felt really, really inferior. I didn't feel like I was a fun person to be around. I actually felt like everyone around me was just tolerating me because whenever I was younger, I was told to shut up. I was told that you talk too much. I was told that I was argumentative, that I was just too much. So what happened is that I hid a lot of myself to try and fit into the school that I was in, the people I was running around with, because I couldn't be me. So then, whenever I was a little bit older, I just assumed that people were talking about me behind my back. They were being nice to my face, but behind my back, they were like, oh, we don't want to hang out with Dean. Like, let's not invite Dean to this thing. He's too much. He'll take over. He's a lot. And so whenever I was drinking, that was my way of bringing myself up to the level that everyone else was. Even like straight people and people in the industry, I just felt like this weird sort of a bit of a loser, really. I didn't look like a loser. I didn't act like a loser. But through therapy, I realized that my brain was telling me that I was not as good as these people. I was not welcome around these people. So to try and, not to fit in, because it's such a cliche, but my psychological response to that was, if I drink and if I take drugs, then the people around me will just see me as one of them. You know, I'll be on the same level as them, and therefore we can kiki and have a good time together. And it worked, because I was getting invited to after parties, and after parties actually are quite fun. And I was like, okay, this is cool. People wanted to hang out with me, and I thought it was because I was me. It wasn't. It was because I was a party friend. And they would ring me because they knew that they could have a good time with me, because I'm actually a fun person. But through therapy, I realized that if I was to take all of those external factors away, what would happen to me? And actually, it was that I would be left just being gay Dean again that got bullied in school, you know? So it was about me in therapy trying to realize, who actually am I as a person? Like, why would anyone pick up the phone and say, Dean, shall we grab a drink? Or let's ask Dean his opinion on this. You know, it was all of those things. It's all about being wanted, being heard, being valued, and actually knowing what you bring to the party. And by the party, I mean society. And for 29 years, I didn't actually know what that was. But I was drinking champagne, doing coke, having sex with guys, and I thought that that was just part of me being a gay living in London.
Again, it's speaking to our experiences as children and our childhood. Like, I know Julian you've spoken to me about before, about how you'd experienced domestic abuse as a child. And one of the words that really stood out to me was that you said your childhood was chaotic. It was chaos. Tell us a little bit about how that put you onto a journey where you ended up.
Yes, so my childhood was very chaotic. I grew up in a domestic abuse household, and it definitely played a part in my substance use that was to follow. I just remember being really scared, not just scared for myself, but also for my mum, my siblings, and yeah, it was just this hypervigilance, not of just worried about the safety of my family, but also about me, because I was coming to terms with my own sexuality. Fast forward to when I was 16 and I moved into a youth hostel. That's when I was living alone and I started to use alcohol. I was in a lot of pain and, I had a lot of complex trauma. And I used to just escape and numb myself with vodka, and it used to just be straight vodka. And I really remember times when I was in my room in this little youth hostel, which was chaos as well. So I went from chaos to chaos. And I just remember just being there so lonely, and actually I used to listen to Beyonce, Scared of Lonely. And I think that really, when I think back to that time, that was a really lonely time. But in a weird way, alcohol at that time gave me comfort, or it gave me something just to manage the pain that I was going through. And yeah, it was extremely difficult.
It's interesting because obviously that's a narrative that is very common in terms of having a traumatic childhood. But for Dani, you, on the other hand, had a really supportive childhood. Like, your parents embraced you as a trans person, and that wasn't, your experience wasn't similar to Julian and Dean's.
Yeah, it took a while. The gay came first, the trans came second. I think that was indicative of growing up in the 90s, though trans wasn't really on the radar for me. They understood the gay thing really quickly and got on board with it. And my dad just thought that I was like David Bowie or Boy George, probably not Pete Burns, but call a spade, Pete Burns. And then, yeah, when I came out, they were cool. It took a while with the trans thing. Obviously, with my dad, I think dads are just a sticky area for everybody. If I did a show of hands who's got a tricky relationship with their dad, I think it would be a sea of hands, Oh, me. And it took a while. I think my dad felt like he had to grieve the loss of someone, and not that I'd been there all along, just with a different mask on for a while, But in terms of childhood, I was so lucky. Considering where I grew up, I'm from Barry in South Wales, Barry Island, and not the most liberal place. And I returned to my LGBT friends in the area, because we always find each other. And they were having a horrible time. I mean, being ripped apart and had horrible families and were bullied mercilessly. And it wasn't my experience. So, yeah, and I understand the privilege in that, and I understand how lucky I was. I mean, my school had gender-neutral bathrooms and unisex uniform. There was no gender in anything, and I went to a Catholic school with nuns. It doesn't make any sense.
You're bucking the trend.
Yeah.
But then your slide into addiction came later.
Oh, yeah.
And that was around different circumstances.
I think if you're an addict, you are born an addict. And something that I like to make really clear is that, although my addiction ruined my life in terms of alcohol, men, drugs, addiction has been in every aspect of my life. I'm an obsessive person, And when I was a kid, that would be, I had to have the most of, if it was like collecting things, I had to have the most. I'm an addict to that thing. It was always the most of everything. And it wasn't, you're right, it wasn't until later in my life that it manifested in what in society is demonized so much. But I'm an addict of everything. I am an addict through and through in anything, and I have to manage that constantly because it comes now. I mean, I'm over 3 years clean and sober, and I still have to keep a check on myself to be like, okay, maybe put the Instagram down, maybe put the sweets down, maybe put the cigarettes down. You know, like, I have to monitor myself because addiction operates my body as if it's like a control room in the back of my head, and there's a little gremlin driving me, and that gremlin is like addict, 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 addict.
When did you recognize that addictive side to yourself? How did you, was it through therapy, was it talking? How did you?
NA. So I go to Narcotics Anonymous. It's similar to what you probably know of, if you're not familiar with the program, is similar to like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a program, you work it, it's 12 steps. It's a form of therapy, I guess. You have a sponsor. You can go to as many meetings as you want a week. It's like group therapy. And the 12-step program is like a big mirror that you hold up and you look at yourself and how you got here, why you made all of these decisions, and you manage that. I didn't realize that I was such an addict until I wanted to get past drugs and alcohol. And then once I was really looking at the drugs and alcohol, I was like, oh, hang on, I'm an egomaniac, I'm a power addict, a money addict, and you name it. Like, and that was when I worked it out, and I was like, oh, okay, this isn't one thing. You know, I'm lucky that I was never a heroin addict. I'm lucky that it didn't manifest in that way, but it could have easily. You know, maybe I would just went to one party that it wasn't there, but it could have been, you know? So, like, I could have fallen into the trap of addiction in any way. But yeah, it was the program.
And Kenny, like, your trigger for your addiction was something quite deeply personal. Do you want to share how that happened?
Yeah, so, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I can't hear myself. So I was 21, and, you know, my mum was quite ill growing up. She was also, like, addicted to alcohol. And I remember going to the hospital and them basically telling me, like, she's going to die within the next year. And I was like, okay, like, how does a 21-year-old deal with that information? And it happened, and my support system was completely ripped away. My mum was my number one person. She would be calling the doctors, like, when is my son getting an appointment to the doctors to help with my transition? So it was tough to have that ripped away. And then, 6 months later, I lost my dad to cancer. And life just felt crashing. You know, those are the two fundamental people in your life. I felt like I lost my ability to find out who I was, because I was like, how am I going to know what happened in my childhood? Who do I talk to? I was left with a 2-bedroom flat in central London, very privileged, but I was like, how am I going to pay for this? And I had 3 doggies. And I was like, I'm a 21-year-old right now with all of this responsibility, don't understand how to deal with my emotions, because I've never had to deal with this intensity of emotions. And, like, just thrown in the deep end of adulting. I didn't even know how to really cook for myself. I was like, what do I do? And, you know, up until then, alcohol was always this fun, explorative, inner kid kind of bringing that energy out kind of substance. And then it turned to numbing, avoiding, helping me sleep kind of thing. And I remember for the first 6 months after I lost my parents, I would literally lock myself in my house, drink a bottle of Jack Daniels, cry my heart out to the script, and left a note on my front door. I laugh at it now. But if you knock, I'll knock you out. Because I was just so angry and I just didn't know what was going on. And so that's where it all started. And as I got older, it just kind of became the crutch to everything. So whenever I got an intense emotion, I went through a difficult breakup, I didn't get the job that I wanted, whatever, I was just like, okay, I know how to deal with this alcohol. So it essentially became a habit because of that one time. That's what I did.
So you practice something which might be unique to a lot of people in this room. It's called sobriety runs.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that? Because actually I think it's something we could all benefit from, regardless of whether we don't have an addiction or we don't have an ongoing issue. So I think it's actually quite, everyone has dry January, but sobriety runs are quite similar but different.
Yeah. Well, it actually started from trying a dry January. So just to make it very clear, I still drink, but I engage with moments of sobriety. So it was 3 years ago, I tried dry January. I was like, okay, I really just want to sit intentionally with my feelings. And first of all, it was about discipline and understanding how to just control myself, because I felt like my life was run by emotions, and that ended up being run by alcohol to avoid it. And I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh my God, I feel so good. I'm getting up at 10 o'clock every day. I feel like I'm an adult. What is this? Like, even small things like taking care of my health, brushing my teeth every day. I know that sounds like a really small thing. I just wasn't doing that because I was drinking so frequently. And I was like, okay, how can I manifest more of these good feelings into my life? Okay, let's do 2 months. Let's extend dry January to February. I was like, okay, this is great. And then I started to, see the kind of like benefits that come from alcohol, like my nervous system calming down, just having a clearer sense of mind, having more money, not going home and waking up the next morning thinking, fuck, what did I do wrong the night before? Like all of that anxiety that comes over with hangovers. And then now it's just got to a point where I start with dry January, and I always suggest if somebody wants to engage with sobriety, it's a good time because it's the time in which people it's more acceptable to be sober, because it's like, oh, doing dry January, it's acceptable.
I think that acceptability thing is quite an issue, because it must be quite difficult. We're such a drink-centered culture, and especially in the queer scene, like the bars and the clubs, they're so central to our identity. So, I mean, I met you in clubs.
Well, I mean, I ran clubs. That was what I did. I mean, it was like the worst place for me to be. But I ran clubs for the first bit of my career, yeah. I mean, I ended up running Shadow Lounge in Soho for a couple of years.
I remember that.
You remember that. And Dean remembers that.
The amount of times that I would
That's how we all met.
That's how we met.
But that's the truth is, it's how we all met.
Is it hard then to put yourself back into those environments? Because traditionally, historically, with NA and AA, they're dealing with communities where the people around you are not necessarily so supportive. But a lot of my friends who have been through rehab actually then find their true friends who continue to support them afterwards. But traditionally, NA tells you that you should cut all your ties. So how do you maintain being part of a queer community and a queer scene, being sober?
I would say I know exactly what you mean, and I've been to those types of NA fellowships. I only go to LGBT meetings now, and it's completely different because we know the reality that that's how we all get together, and as well, look at some of the biggest faces in queer nightlife. They're all sober. Like the biggest DJs, the biggest club promoters, the managers of the venues, so many. I mean, some of them are really not, and they should be, but we're here and ready for them when they join us. But we're all doing it sober with one too many Red Bulls. That's my crux now, is these Red Bulls. How sad.
Julian, it's you work for Antidote, which for some people in the room that might not be aware of it, is an LGBTQ-specific addiction therapy service. Is that correct or not?
No. I would say it's close. So Antidote is an LGBTQ+ drug, alcohol, and chemsex support service. So we support queer people who might want to consider making changes or might want to reduce the substances that they're using. So the service is run by queer people for queer people. So I think that's also really important in terms of understanding the different nuances versus the general population in terms of our relationship with drugs and alcohol. And it's a harm reduction service at heart, so we don't require people to want to be abstinent. We think it's really important that people, choose and find their own route to recovery, whatever that might look like. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it did. So what kind of problems do you see walk through your door? Because obviously in harm reduction, you're just trying to get people to realize the things that are putting them in the path of danger. I guess harm reduction is a sobriety run of 100 days as well. So what are the common problems that you see?
So a big problem or a common problem we see is that there's a lot of shame and guilt around the substance that's being taken or used. And then also that shame is often compounded by, feeling of, I guess, being different or, exploring sexuality, gender identity. But also we're seeing now, different elements of the queer scene where, and also I think shame has evolved from the 80s, 90s, and noughties, right? So it's much more easier and quicker to also perpetuate and to dish out shame on social media, on hookup sites like Grindr, for example. I remember when I used to be scrolling through Grindr back in my using days when I was using Kens, and the things that you would see, like no masks or no femmes was most common, and just, imagine seeing that and trying to search for connection on that app and seeing that you're not good enough for that person or that you're singled out. So there's a whole range of different things, but shame is definitely still present.
What you do is so important. It's amazing. Because there's also things that are really specific to LGBT culture that is not outside of it as well, right? Even like the types of drugs that are popular. I mean, like GHB.
Yeah.
GHB is a gay drug, and it's killing us. But outside of our community, it might be done, but it's not in the same way. So you need people that understand you in the way that you and the people you work with do.
Because we also glamorize that lifestyle as well, doesn't we? So then you're kind of having that balance of between being the right kind of gay person in a social environment, but then also looking after your mental health.
Definitely, and I think you make a good point about, when clients come through, they feel seen, they feel heard as well, because most of our clients wouldn't go to a mainstream drug and alcohol service, mainly through fear of, those sort of negative experiences that they've probably heard about in the past. So it's really important that we have a service that is there for the community as well, and that is also pan-London, so we'll support anyone that lives in a London borough as well. It's not borough-specific.
So you didn't go through therapy yourself, did you? So you found your own way through your addiction.
Yeah, I did, yeah. So, I mean, I had psychotherapy, but I never went through any sort of addiction therapy. I mean, kind of what helped me was, in a way, I left this country and went to Australia for 2 years. But I will say that within the first night of being in Sydney, I fell straight into a gay club. I was doing G, and it was just, I was like, the next day I was just like mortified that I'd gone there to, do something different and to really just, I guess, soul search. And I almost ended back up in that crowd because it is actually, like you said, it is glamorized, or it can be glamorized. But also it's really normalized, not just G, just general, alcohol use and other recreational club drug sort of things. That was the thing, right? Why did we go to the gay bar or to the queer bars? For fun, for safety, to have a good time?
So what are the kind of tools that you used to get through your troubles?
I think when I took a step back and managed to kind of look at the circle that I was in, I knew that I had to make some changes there. And that, they weren't easy decisions because I had to cut a lot of friends out. And also I just had to focus on myself and really actually just be really honest and brutal with myself. Like, do I want to keep doing this? Going 3 days without sleeping, without eating, without drinking much, and feeling like crap at the end of it? Or am I going to make something of my life? Or am I going to also give back to the community? And I think that's what, I love my job because I'm there with the community, like grassroots, at that level, and I'm there to support people and I can give back. I've got that kind of experience, but also, I care about us.
I just want to give that a round of applause. I think that's so amazing, what you do. It's so good. It's really good. Thank you.
So as we the last 10 minutes or so, what I want to do is give people a little bit of an insight into how they can either help themselves or what are the kind of things they can do if they see a friend in trouble. So, I think all of you have been in that space that can offer some advice. Julian, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would like to kind of hit on the point, if you have a friend that you believe is, or you're worried about, then speak to your friend first before going and doing anything without their permission or consent, and kind of just see whether they do actually want support. I think it's a slow burner, or it can be a slow burner, realizing when is the right time to reach out for help. And everyone goes at different kind of paces. So just have a chat, and also just be there for your friends. So, they can call you, they can have a chat, they can have a cry, you can have a laugh, whatever it is, just kind of, before you do anything, and kind of rush in to also save or rescue someone. In reality, yeah, we can support each other and help each other, but it's also on the other person to kind of do something for themselves as well, right? You can't be rescued. You have to rescue yourself, I think.
I think it's like, only you can help yourself. I think that's one of the things that we've spoken about with you, Dani, in your journey is like, ultimately, it's only you can help yourself.
Oh my God, totally. Because I had the concerned friends and the sit-down talks long before I got taken to a meeting. For me, I'm such a convert of the program and the support system that is there, that I would say that I guess I'll answer the part that's like, if you're feeling like it's become a problem. And going to a recovery meeting in any of its forms, AA, NA, CA, SA, there's loads of them, is so life-changing. And if you ask somebody who's like scared because you're going to be in a room full of straight people, there are LGBT meetings, there's so many little different types of meetings to go to. And my advice for if you're going to seek that out, or if you're curious about it, is when you go to your first meeting, listen for the similarities instead of focusing on what is different. Because I went to my first meeting, first of all, I thought I'd walked into a cult. I was like, they're all chanting the same things at the same time. It's a little bit like, ooh. But I was with someone who was able to go like, oh, just like listen for the similarities. And then you realize like, oh, I've got so much in common with these people, rather than like, oh, well, I wasn't doing that, so it doesn't apply to me. It does. We've just all struggled in a different way, So yeah, my advice would be check out a meeting, and the support system is there. Like it's like open arms. It doesn't matter whether you're coming for your first time or coming back from a relapse, or you're there 3 times a day. It doesn't matter. It's just there for you.
Okay, what are some of the unhelpful things that you hear when you're on a sobriety run?
Oh, there's so much of it. I'd say the main one is like, just quit. That typical one. Or like, I think some people don't necessarily understand. I think it's hard to manage when people don't know when I'm doing my sobriety runs, because then they influence my drinking more, and I have to kind of put down my foot and be like, no. But I think I'm probably better off answering what I found helpful, if I'm honest. And when talking about support systems and groups, I use Smart Recovery, which is more like a management tool. So it isn't necessarily about sobriety, but actually learning how to manage those addictions, which I found really helpful. And having a community around me was great. Whenever I would go to drink, I'd ask myself the question, am I drinking for a good reason or a bad reason? So just assessing my mental health and ensuring that I'm not doing it to numb feelings or hide from things. And also, every year, I write down a list of things that trigger me to drink. And I just review it, and I just remember it. So every time I'm in a situation that, I don't know, coming on the stage today, feeling anxiety before I arrive here, Kenny, what can we do? Right, get some sweets, have a sugar rush instead, and then just blast on the stage and have a great time. So I think analyzing things like that has been really helpful for me.
That's interesting. Like, how do you practice good mental health? Like you said earlier, going to the Brits tonight, it's a booze-centric event. What are the daily things, what are the common things that people in this room can take home and practice for themselves to practice good mental health when they're in a situation that they feel pressured to drink, when they might not want to?
I would probably say just take a step back and just look at the situation that you're in. Giving up drugs and alcohol is not going to fix everything. So please listen to what everyone says on this panel today, but just know that by stopping drinking and by stopping any kind of addiction, it's not going to turn a light on and you're going to become this well-rounded, fully formed, happy individual who can go forth and conquer. Stopping drinking, stopping taking drugs, taking out the external factors that are holding you back is only the beginning. And I think these guys would all agree with that. So I have learned the things that make me happy now, and they make me really happy. Like, I get goosebumps when I hear certain songs. I get like, and I call it a love wave when I'm in a moment that is just so exciting and it makes me genuinely happy. And I embrace that fully, because whenever I was drinking and taking drugs, I was numb to those things. We were just going partying. It didn't matter what the DJ was playing. As long as there was drink, as long as there was drugs, we were having a good time. Taking all that out, you've got to work out what makes you happy. And if, my friends, that is sitting in your bed in the morning with the curtains open, with the rain at your window, and drinking a beautiful cup of tea, please enjoy every single moment of that, because that is what life is about. Life is not about clothes or money or sex or any of those external factors that society tells us it is. It really isn't that. It's the tiny, small moments that we sometimes don't realize are moments that will really make you a happy person. And it just so happens that when you take drugs, alcohol, sex, and any other addiction out of your own equation, you see that the trees are greener, the sun is sunnier, the music is musicier, the conversations are better. Everything just gets that little bit better. And that's when you take steps forward, and that's when your life becomes better, so that you can look back at a bar and you can see the vodka and you're like, oh, do you remember when I used to drink? That is the magic, and that's what I call sober magic. So in summary, as you go home today, on the tube, in the Uber, as you walk home, just look around you at the world and just pick things out that make you feel that little bit happier, and really look at things. If someone walks out here and they say, thank you for coming today, look them in the eye and say thank you back. Because if you can grab those little moments, your life, I promise you, will get 100 times better. And also, if you go home tonight and you have a drink, it's fine. It's okay. It's not a bad thing to drink. But go out there and really live your life and find those little moments of magic, and you'll be just fine.
Thank you.
Oh my God, what a moment.
Julian, just quickly, so obviously you spoke about harm reduction. So we can end on a note where we can give people direction. If somebody thinks they have a problem or they just want to reduce their usage, what are the things they can do right now or tomorrow to get help?
I guess, of course, I'm going to say is to email antidote@londonfriend.org.uk, and there you'll be able to have a chat with a member of our team. And, there's no pressure on you to stay with our service once you've had that chat. It's really up to you whether you want to continue, accessing our services. But I make a great cup of tea and a very strong coffee. And, we have 2 weekly drop-ins a week, so you could just come in and see us. And, yeah, I think just all reach out, like we've spoken about, is LGBTQ Smart Recovery, the fellowships. There's loads of different avenues or routes that you can go down that's right for you. And on our Antidote webpage, on our website, there's lots of harm reduction and home kind of self-care tips as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. It's incredible.